In 1974, a young, struggling father of two would submit his first full-length novel for publication. He'd published other, shorter works before, but this was his big break, the work that would change his life, as well as writing, storytelling, and the horror genre forever. Of course, I'm talking about the man, the myth, the legend, the king himself, Stephen King.
Why Stephen King?
Stephen King is an American novelist born in Maine in 1947 to Donald Edwin and Nellie Ruth Pillsbury King. At the age of 2, Stephen's father left the family, leaving his mother to do odd jobs to support herself and her 2 young boys.
I need a break.
At 6 years old, Stephen King began writing. At first he was copying down stories he liked, but with encouragement from his mother, he started writing his own stories, and as he got older, he began putting his stories in a locally published magazine his older brother David made. And in 1965, he submitted his first short story, I Was a Teenage Grave Robber, to a horror magazine. Shortly after, he went off to university where he met his wife, Tabitha King, and the 2 of them really began making writing royalty. Tabitha herself is a prolific writer, and their sons, Joe Hill and Owen King, are also published authors. They also have a daughter, Naomi King, who is not a writer, but a minister. And insert jab about religion here. But I'm not here to make fun of Naomi King. Maybe she'll get her own video for that. I'm here to make fun of Stephen. So, here we go.
You're Stephen King.
You know Stephen King's works. Even if you don't think you know them, you know them. It was hard to find the exact number, but he's published at least 70 full-length novels, dozens of short stories, and his works have been turned into movies, TV shows, and parodied to hell and back. Some of his most famous works include The Shining, Cujo, Pet Sematary, and the book that started it all, Carrie.
I'm writing.
You know how to write?
I read once that Stephen King describes getting his ideas like a mug, where one part of it is the cup and the other part of it is the handle, and the 2 parts of the mug don't usually come at the same time. Sometimes you'll have a handle for years with no cup. Maybe you have a whole bunch of cups and handles, but none of them fit together. But it is so satisfying when they do come together. I've lived through my mugs coming together, and it's so fun. And in doing research for this video and reading Stephen King's memoir and writing guide on writing, I got some insight into how the mug that is Carrie came together. I found a few anecdotes on how Stephen King got the inspiration for Carrie. The first was when he was cleaning high school bathrooms in the summer, and he found out 2 things about girls' locker rooms. First, he discovered tampon disposal bins, some janitors call them mailboxes, in the bathroom stalls, and someone had to explain to him what they are. Then he discovered the women's showers have shower curtains, which apparently the showers Stephen King had seen in men's rooms did not have. And those 2 things came together to inspire the opening scene for Carrie. And for those of you not in the know, the book starts with Carrie getting her first period in the showers at school and getting ruthlessly mocked for it. The second idea was when Stephen King read an article about how some girls get telekinetic powers once they hit puberty. And again, for those of you not in the know, Carrie gets telekinesis is a big part of the story. The other big aspect of the story was Carrie's mistreatment at home and at the hands of her ultra-religious mother and the bullying she got in school. The religious aspect was somewhat inspired by a decoration Stephen King saw when he was helping neighbors move, and he saw a massive crucifix hanging above their couch and thought that if it fell, it would kill them. And the bullying was fleshed out when Stephen King was working as an English teacher, and he was able to reflect on the bully victims at his high school growing up, why they got bullied, what their home lives were like, what kinds of people they were, all through a new lens of a teacher. And I'm sure those aren't all the inspirations that went into Carrie, but those are the parts Stephen King has talked most openly about. Those were the first steps towards changing literature as we know it forever.
I'm a writer.
So I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room. Specifically this elephant, which has white stuff that comes out of it. Salt. This one has pepper. We should also talk about Stephen King's struggles with addiction. I originally wanted to focus a lot more on Cujo when I was planning this video, but I just couldn't find anything. And a big reason for that is because Stephen King was in the throes of his addiction when he wrote it. And what he has to say about it is that although he enjoys the book, he doesn't remember writing it. There were actually a lot of books Stephen King wrote during his battles with addiction, which started in the 70s with drinking, but as his books were adapted to movies, he was exposed more and more to substances at Hollywood parties. And it ended in the late 80s when Stephen King friends and family held an intervention for him where he recounts his wife dumping out the trash can so he'd have to look at the byproducts of his addiction, and that began his journey to sobriety.
I want you to sober up.
And Stephen King has talked a lot about the creative aspect of addiction because it's a trope, right? The tortured drug addict, writer, or artist who only maybe gets their creativity from the substances they abuse. And look, I can't comment on that. Last week my mom yelled at me because I got a root canal and I was too scared to take any of the pain meds they prescribed me. But Stephen King has said that that idea is garbage. He's talked about his fears of losing his creativity or motivation once he got sober, but those fears turned out to be unfounded. The man has written dozens of novels since he got clean, good novels that he can actually talk about and use to inspire and educate others because he actually remembers how he wrote them. And now Stephen is celebrating over 30 years of sobriety. Today, Stephen King is in his mid-70s, and although his writing has slowed down over time, partially due to old age and partially due to injuries he received when he was hit with a car in the early 2000s, he's still a prolific writer. He talks a lot about how he makes himself write every day. I tried to find his most recent work, but he writes a lot, and there's a chance at some point between scripting, recording, and putting up this video, he could put out something new. So what I will say is that you should go read his book on writing. It talks a lot more about his life and writing advice that's aged slightly since the book was published in the early 2000s, but still has so much good advice. So go out and read and write.